Today, I woke up to the silence that has filled my cabin in the deep woods for a long time. It was the same silence I had been searching for after all that had happened. But a few months ago, this silence was violently broken. I think it was late spring, the air was warming up, but the trees hadn't fully dressed in their green leaves yet. I was sitting by the window, drinking coffee, when I heard a low, dull moan. At first, I thought it was some animal, maybe a deer, that was hurt. But the moan grew louder, turning into a strange, hoarse roar I had never heard before. It was something between a cry and a fierce defense. I quickly grabbed my flashlight and a hunting knife. Not to hunt, but to defend myself if necessary. Deep down, I knew anything could happen in this wilderness. I stepped out onto the porch, and my heart nearly stopped. A bear stood before me, huge, powerful, with thick brown fur that looked especially wild in the light of my flashlight. She wasn't roaring or charging. She was just standing there, looking at me with her dark brown eyes, in which there was so much pain that I felt uncomfortable. I slowly lifted the flashlight and saw that she wasn't alone. She was gently nudging something small that lay at her paws. It was a cub, tiny, helpless, barely breathing. I pointed the flashlight at it, and a wave of horror washed over me. There was a large, deep wound on its paw, bleeding profusely. It looked like a trapper's trap had nearly torn its leg off. The cub was whimpering, and its quiet cry was audible even from a distance. I, James, a former military medic, knew what pain looked like, and this small ball of pain touched my deepest chords. The bear raised her head and looked at me. She seemed to be asking for help. Her eyes were filled with a strange, incomprehensible hope. It was as if she knew I could help, that I wouldn't hunt her. I slowly put the knife down on the ground, and it was the hardest decision of my life. I discarded all thoughts of safety. The instinct to help, which had once been my job, took over again. I slowly reached out to the cub, and I was surprised that the mother didn't attack me. She just took a step back. It was as if she had given me permission. I carefully picked up the cub, which was surprisingly light, and took it into the cabin. The bear, without hesitation, followed me inside, which was absolutely unthinkable for a wild animal. She stopped by the doorway and roared softly again. This time her roar was not as desperate. It was more like a quiet moan, full of hope. I placed the cub on the table in my cabin. I needed my medical kit. The bear stood by the door, and I spoke to her as if she were a person who understood everything. I said, "Don't be afraid, Monica, I'll help him." I don't know why I called her Monica, but the name just came to me. I took the medical supplies I had from my kit and got to work. I had seen worse wounds, but this wound on the small cub's paw just broke my heart. I cleaned the wound, stitched it up, and bandaged the paw. All this time, Monica stood and watched me. Her eyes were focused on me. Her gaze was piercing and deep. When I finished, I took the cub and placed it on a soft rug by the fireplace. I saw the bear approach, carefully sniff the little one, and then look at me. Her gaze was filled with a strange gratitude, as pure as crystal. She roared again, but this time not with pain, but with relief. I was grateful that I could help. I felt alive for the first time in years. I named the cub Freddie. Then I went to sleep, and I slept more soundly than I had in years. This was only the first day of our acquaintance, but I already felt that my life had changed. The next day, when I woke up, I saw that the mother bear had already left, but the cub was still here, sleeping on the rug. I went downstairs and made myself breakfast. Suddenly, I heard familiar steps at the door. I opened it and saw Monica standing with a huge basket filled with berries and roots from the forest. I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw that she had brought this for Freddie, her son. That's how our life together began. I treated Freddie. Every day, I changed his bandage, gave him the medicine I had, and comforted him. Monica, all this time, stood by the door and watched me intently. Her trust in me grew with each passing day. Then, she started to come into the cabin and lie down by the fireplace. She was calm, not growling, just breathing softly and watching me take care of her son. She became a part of my life. Giving them the names Freddie and Monica was important to me. I no longer felt lonely. I saw that Monica was a very smart and loving mother. She brought berries and fish and placed them by the door for Freddie. I, in turn, cooked him porridge and fed him with a spoon, which was very touching. I felt this was my purpose. Weeks passed. Freddie was recovering. He could already walk, and his paw had healed. leaving only a small scar which I called the scar of courage. Freddy became more active and started playing with me. He would roar comically and try to tug at my pants like a real, healthy cub. Monica would watch him, and her eyes were filled with joy. I was no longer afraid of her, and I knew she would not harm me. She had become my friend. Months passed. Summer was in full swing. The sun was shining brightly, and the forest was filled with birds. Freddy was already a big and strong bear. He could walk on his own, and his wound had fully healed. Several months had passed, and I realized that our time together was coming to an end. Monica started looking at me differently. In her eyes, I saw a kind of longing, a kind of sadness. It was as if she knew that soon we would have to say goodbye. I didn't want to say goodbye, but I knew it was the only right choice. One day, I woke up to find Monica standing by the door. She looked at me, and then at Freddy, who was sleeping by the fireplace. I understood. I walked over to her and whispered, "Goodbye, Monica." She roared softly, and this roar was full of pain, but also of gratitude. She gently nudged Freddy, and he woke up. He carefully walked over to me, sniffed my hand, and looked into my eyes as if to thank me for what I had done for him. Then, they looked at each other and walked into the forest, into their natural habitat. I stood by the door and watched them disappear into the forest. I felt a kind of emptiness. My cabin, which had been filled with noise, warmth, and love, was silent again. But this time it was a different kind of silence. It was a peaceful silence, a silence of fulfillment. For the first time in years, I felt whole. I had found my place in the world, not in the chaos of war, but in the quiet of the woods, in a bond with two magnificent creatures. This wasn't just a rescue story. It was a story of healing. A story of a man who saved a bear, but was also, in turn, saved by one. The next spring came. I was out on the porch, sipping coffee just as I had that day when I first met them. The sun was warm on my skin, and the air was filled with the smell of new growth. I walked to the edge of the woods where I had last seen them disappear. I just wanted to feel a connection again. My heart felt a little heavy, but I knew they were where they belonged. As I turned to go back to my cabin, I saw it. Right on the spot where Monica had brought Freddy to me was a small pile of berries and some fresh fish. I knew it was from them. It was a sign, not a goodbye, but a promise that the bond we had formed was still there. And it was a thank you. I smiled and went back to my cabin. Life was good, and I was not alone.